Hey y'all. Welcome back to my channel. There has been this new type of video trending. It's basically called giving up the American dream, or why I gave up on the American dream. But if I don't like the video, I will turn it off. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. We are reacting to this person talk about the American dream and what the American dream is. I guess, I don't know. Let's just see what they're talking about.
With Wix e-commerce.
For a long time, the typical idea of the American dream was something that I strive for. I would have did anything, regardless of how shitty of a job or how questionable of a job it was. I would at one point do that, and with the goal of attaining this elusive American dream. And if you're not familiar, you know, this idea that there's a certain balance that can be met, typically in America, but it extends across all the world now, where you can achieve a certain cost of living mixed with a certain income level, and it kind of assures you a certain standard of living that allows you to be comfortable, allows you to not have to worry about bills and not have to worry about how you're going to provide for your family or your livelihood. And it was a real thing for a long time in the 1900s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Then as it got to the 90s and the 2010s, 2020s, it's no longer a dream, and I've given up on it. I've given up on the American dream and the idea of that. We have the same version of that here in Canada. Everyone knows what it means, and I just realized, like, it's not a dream. It's a myth. It's a contract towards a bondage in a sense, because this idea of like working, most typically a job that you don't like, and you're working really hard for it because you have this vision of this future that you want to attain. You want to buy that house, you want to buy that car, you want to provide for your family. And now, with like the house, the cost of real estate and housing, and just the amount of, if at one point, one person in the family could work a full-time, very regular job. In my city, that was factory work once upon a time, where you could have a 5-person family, 2 adults, 3 kids, one person's working in a family, and you're able to provide comfortably for your family. And nowadays, you need dual income, and even then, it's not enough to get by. And so what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that I've given up on the pursuit of an ideal and worthy life. What I'm saying is, I've given up on the American dream, and I'm pursuing the Adrian dream. What does the Adrian dream mean? For me, it's individual, obviously, but for me, it's evaluating my life and asking myself, what do I ideally want? Do I want to work 30 or 40 years to pay off a house that is, $800,000? Like, the average house, at least in my part of the world, is $800,000. But all around the world, housing prices.
I get enamored by this because I dropped out of college. Like, college is a very common route to the American dream. I probably just relate to it. I'm not necessarily going to jump all in and be like, that's something that I want to do. That's something that I have noticed. All 3 videos that I've watched this on, the 2 I've linked below and this one, say that it's important to know who you are and what you want.
They're going up like crazy, and it's to the point where people will still have this goal to own a house, and they're willing to buy a house for $800,000, not consider the taxes, not consider the interest that you're paying over 30 years, not considering the fact that it keeps you like bonded to a particular location, unable to take risks, unable to go out and follow your passions and give yourself time to mental freedom and time to go and pursue those things. And then you get stuck in this place of complacency, what I would view as settling. And I don't want to do that. I refuse to do that. And for the past few years, I realized I'm shifting. There's a natural shift in my idea of what I want to do with my life. And I started creating a vision of what's my ideal life. What do I want to do? For me, everyone, again, is different. But for me, that means being in a position where I'm able to work remotely. I'm able to spend 8 to 12 months in various countries, travel the world, see different cultures, meet different people, learn a language, becoming fluent in Spanish, which I started to do, because I used to backpack a lot. But going to a country and learning that, exploring what the world and life has to offer. And I'm at a point, and I've been here for a few years at this point, where my ideal life means that I would rather make $60,000 a year, just $60,000 a year, nothing extravagant, but be able to have the freedom to travel the world and see different countries and move, right? Just freedom in the truest sense of the word. I'd rather have $60,000 and do that than to have $150,000 and be forced to remain in one location because of that job and the house that you invested in. To be able to continue challenging myself, putting myself in uncomfortable situations. See, the American dream, the thing about the American dream is that the American dream and complacency and comfort and certainty pretty much goes hand in hand. And for me, I'd rather pursue fulfillment over certainty. I'd rather pursue my own peace of mind and happiness over stability, right? Fulfillment over stability. That's the idea of my ideal life. Now, this doesn't mean that, like, I'm not saying that I don't like money. I love money, right? I love what it can do for you. I love how it can provide for you. I love how it can remove the negative from your life to let your happiness shine through. Because money can't buy you happiness, but it can remove the things from your life that impede your happiness. So I'm not saying that money ain't cool. I love money, but I want it on my terms. And I'd rather have less money on my terms than more money, and I have to abide by a certain location and a certain company and doing something I don't necessarily like. You know, the American dream it's a myth. It's a myth because the American dream, for people that are still pursuing it, for most people and most of the time, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare because you're working so hard for something without realizing what it means in your life, what it won't allow you to do, because it gets you stuck. And for me to commit 30 to 40 years to paying off an overexpensive house, it's just not worth it for me. You know, people talk about real estate and how it's an investment, but the reality is, with the real estate going up so much, right, it appreciates at a much higher rate than people's income, right? And plus, not to mention the cost of food and the cost of living. It appreciates so much faster than most people's income that it gets to a point where you have to ask yourself, because I ask myself this all the time, at what point are you not willing to buy a house? When the average house here in North America is $300,000, to me it's worth it. $500,000, worth it. But when the cost of real estate goes up 300% in like 12 years, sometimes faster than that, it gets to a point where for me, I'd say I'm not willing to put $1 million or $1.5 million. We're talking after taxes, after interest, after it's paid off, maintenance, etc. I'm not willing to put $1 million into a house, a place to live.
One thing that I will say that I'm noticing that he's doing is that he is simply reasoning. I can equate it, when you're young, you want a puppy. When your parents are like, no, not because they don't want you to have a puppy, but they're like, who's going to take it out? Who's going to change it? Who's going to potty train it? All those things that you have to factor in. So what I hear him doing right now that I don't often do, or that I'm still working on doing, is reasoning. What he's willing to do with what is to get to a new position. Yes, you can attain it, but can you maintain it? Not really.
No, I would much rather, following the Adrian dream, right? My own ideal lifestyle. If I have $1 million, or if I'm expecting to put $1 million into something, I'd rather put it into investments where I know it's paying me back, so I can live off of that as a residual income, whatever the case may be, whether it's dividends, if it's interest, or it's appreciating assets. Shoot, even cryptocurrency, which I'm heavily involved in now. I'd rather put money into that and not have my biggest investment in a house that forces me to one location, that means I have to have a job that's stable in order to make stable payments. So for most people, most of the time, I think the American dream is more of a nightmare, and they just don't realize it yet. You know, there's a quote from the comedian George Carlin in one of his skits. He said, they call it the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. And that whole skit is funny. If you haven't seen it, look it up. But I realized, man, like it's really that. Because you have to be so connected to a system and a certain tradition or a certain way of living in order to believe that that's an ideal and worthy pursuit. Now, I'm not knocking people that buy houses and pursue the stereotypical American dream. I'm just saying that I realized I'm giving up on it. And I'm going after my dreams. And I would encourage you to go after your dreams. Ask yourself, what does an ideal lifestyle look like for you? Is buying a house an ideal lifestyle for you? Is that part of what you see, a vision for yourself? Or are you doing it just because you're told to do that? You know, people say it's one of your biggest investments, the greatest investments you can make. For the average person, it is, because the average person is unwilling to look within and ask themselves, what do they want? and explore the opportunities, question tradition. So yeah, for the average person in the house, I mean, if you're going to spend your money unwisely, which the average person isn't very financially literate, then yeah, putting yourself in a position where you're forced to make payments towards an appreciating asset that's yours, more or less, because, you know, if you don't pay property taxes, see what happens. But for the average person, it makes sense. But for those of you that have a different idea of what life is meant to be, and you want to explore what's meaningful to you and live a life with intention, I would encourage you to not pursue the American dream, or whatever, you know, where, it doesn't matter where you are. The American dream is a worldwide thing now, whether you're living in China or in Germany, Australia, right, Canada, US. I would encourage you to ask yourself, what do you want in your life? You know, what is it that you think is ideal? Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to see the world? A lot of people don't consider spending 8 to 12 months in a different country every year because they don't think it's a possibility, right? They have this self-limiting belief where it's like, all I can do is work at a call center or a factory, or do my job that I've always been working here, and hopefully I can buy a house. But they don't even consider the idea that, hey, you could live like a king or a queen. You could live like royalty in a place like Thailand for $30,000 a year. If you could find a way to make $30,000 a year remotely, you could live like a king there. You could eat out every day if you want, because every meal only costs $3. You could buy you could rent an apartment or a condo for $400 or $500, and that's like the high end. There's so much opportunity. You can learn a new language.
I don't have kids. I'm not knocking anybody who has kids, but I feel like that holds people to a certain place a lot of the time. I'm not currently working remotely, so he started talking about that. My mom was like, wait, what? And also, he was saying like the American dream is like a certain type of life stability, for lack of better words. I can't remember his exact words, but for me it was always health insurance. So thank God now I do have a job and it does assure me health insurance. But I struggle with that a lot too. Like, why am I putting so much thought into a what if? It's like I can't knock it. Like, if those bills ever do come rolling in, you don't want to have to pay those. My dad will always say, you're off my health insurance at 26. You need to get a job that's going to have that. Basically saying that I need to be able to provide for myself that stability. But comment below what it was for you. Were your parents like, are you going to have a car? You need to be out of my house by.
You commit time and you have the freedom to work on your passions.
And he's in Canada, by the way. It just goes to show you that we're all the same.
Work on music or art or creating videos. Expressing yourself the way that you actually want to express yourself, instead of settling and conforming based off of what everyone else has told you is the right structure for life. I don't want kids. A lot of people that don't want kids, they think that's what they have to do. That's the typical American dream. You have your kids, you have your job, you're working it for 30 years, you buy your house. You know, I question everything. And that's why I made the decision. Like, I don't want kids because it's not what I want. I don't want to buy a house because it's not what I want, not here. I don't know if I'd ever buy a house and own it myself. I don't know if I'd ever buy a house and live in it. If I was going to buy a house, it'd probably be as an investment. But the way the world's going is like, you got to understand, seeking certainty. There's no such thing as a stable job. So, you know, this whole video is somewhat of a rant, just because it's been on my mind. Because I see people where they're pursuing something that they don't actually even want. They're pursuing something that they don't even actually enjoy. And it's sad to me because there's so much opportunity. And it's not in America. It's not like an American specific opportunity. It's not a Western specific opportunity. There's a worldwide opportunity now where you can work remotely, you can travel, you can live in different destinations and continue to make a living for yourselves. And, you know, buying a house doesn't have to be the greatest investment. For a lot of people, it's not. And I just hope to encourage you, as I'm encouraging myself, to be the hero of your story, to be the hero of your life. Don't just be an extra in your own story. For a lot of people, their parents are the main character in their story. For a lot of people, their spouse or their children is the main character in their story. Ask yourself, if you had to write down what your ideal life looks like, a reasonable ideal life. I'm not talking about like having a $5 million income and all that stuff. But if you wrote down a reasonable ideal life, you'd be surprised at how different it looks from what you're pursuing right now. And why? We have one life to live. As far as we know, this is it. Does something come after this? Who really knows? So we can only go off what we know for certain. And what we know for certain is that we have this life. We don't know how long it's going to be. We could pass away tomorrow. We could live 50 more years. And at the end of your life, do you want to be in your deathbed and looking back and reflecting on your life and saying, I could have did more. I could have taken on a heavier burden and pursued what was truly meaningful to me, but instead I got complacent, I got comfortable, and I followed what everyone else told me to do, and I lived a predictable life. I don't want that. And that's why I gave up the typical American dream, and I'm pursuing the Adrian dream. And I hope you do the same. And this is a bit of a rant video, but I felt like I was out here, it's the evening, it's a nice night, and I'm glad I made it, and I hope you got something from this. And that's it. See you in the next video.
With these types of videos, you got to be careful because this all subjective. Like, he didn't try to make it say, this is what it is. No, he was like, in my opinion, this is what I want for me. Emphasis on the him, meaning it could be different for you. I love how he ended the video with the encouragement. Honestly, in order to attain that type of life, what I see myself having to do is work 9 to 5 and then coming home and working from 5 to 10 to create a side hustle that eventually become my main job. Like, for me, it would be my roommate. I would have to prove this is stable enough for me to quit. We rely heavily on my source of income. So I would kind of have to go through that proving myself. Who wants to do that? When you come home from working your 9 to 5, you don't want to do any of that. It's interesting to me, the whole myth idea, and I'm glad that it's becoming so trendy, I guess, for lack of words, because I can hop on a trend for once. So I hope you enjoyed this video and hearing everything he had to say. I definitely did. I was, again, enamored by it, giving me something to think about as I go throughout day to day. Thanks again. Talk to you later.